Good morning. We're going to get ready to get started. Let me say welcome to the first Sunday in September, and welcome to all our visiting members, all our members that are present, all of those who are joining us on social media. Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to grace your presence just one more time. I ask that you continue to show mercy on our church family, our home family, all our friends, and those throughout the world. God, I ask that you continue to bless our church, that we may continue to do what is right in your sight. Continue to bless our pastor as he still continues on his road of healing. And bless the First Lady and keep her going strong also. I ask that you bless all those families that are in bereavement. Send a special prayer to the families in Mississippi who lost family members on the bus crash. I ask that you let them know that they are not forgotten and that they are dear and near to those in all our hearts, even though we may not know who they are. We send blessings and prayers to their family. God, I ask that you bless the sick and shut in, all our church members, and let them know that we have not forgotten them and that we think about them often and we wish them a speedy recovery. God, I ask that you continue to bless the McDowell family. Thank you for allowing us to have Sydney back in our presence and let him continue to heal. We want to send prayers to his sister in Virginia, who's also in the hospital, and his brother that's also in the hospital. God, I ask that you continue to shine a light and a prayer and hold them there in their heart, in your heart, and let them continue to heal and get back on the road to recovery. God, I ask you to bless our service today, all our visiting friends, and everybody who is in hearing of my voice. These blessings I ask in your name. Amen. Once again, good morning. Today our lesson is called Marking Transitions. Our background passage is from Genesis 12, chapter 12 through 13. Our printed passage covers Genesis 13, verse 8 through 18. Our key verse is, so Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. That's coming from Genesis 13, 8 through 13. That's a New Revised Version. I also like to read what it says in reference to God's work in life. Christian adults must desire the depth of spiritual maturity that develops through the acknowledgement of God's activity in our lives. In the case of Abram and Lot, the feud between the herdsmen had the potential to cause serious ramifications between the uncle and nephew, a younger and an elder, who could have grown antagonistic toward each other. As the saying goes, someone in the room needs to be an adult, and in this story, it is Abram who behaves more judiciously than Lot. God does not wish for anyone, especially relatives, to part ways angrily over anything, particularly over matters that may be considered trivial. Many relatives have created strained relationships over material things, distribution of an inheritance, dissolution of property, or even financial transactions. Abram's spiritual maturity and trust in the Lord allowed them to separate amicably. His actions gives us a model to address potentially divisive matters through faith in God and his promise. Now this is a very true lesson because we all have family members, or we know of incidents where family members fall out over the least little thing. Like I said, it's trivial. It's something that you can easily discuss, come together on, or a lot of times people go to court, they get these lawyers, and what you was expecting to gain, you're not going to gain now because the lawyer's going to get their share. So like I said, it's best just to sit down and try to work things out, like they say, amicably among, yourselves. And, that's something a hard lesson in life I think a lot of us need to learn. It says, in 1964, the United States implemented a draft whereby individuals were required to serve in the armed forces voluntarily. Many individuals who opposed the Vietnam on moral, political, or personal grounds chose to resist the draft. One notable person who refused the draft was heavyweight champion boxer Muhammad Ali. He objected on religious grounds, which is characterized as a conscientious objector. As a result, he lost his title and was suspended from boxing. However, in 1971, the draft, recognizing his status as evading the Supreme Court, unanimously overturned his conviction for evading the draft, recognizing his status as a conscientious objector. I thought that was kind of interesting because, a lot of people in the Christian faith, you know, um, when I read that, it made me think of what Reverend Williams used to always say. He would say, "Some are called, some are sent. Some just pick up their coat and went." And it just made me think of that because a lot of times, a lot of people I always hear a lot of people say, "I didn't think that was my calling in life." But unlike with the military, even we don't have the draft anymore; it's voluntarily. Even if you try to run from the Lord, you're not going to succeed. And we've seen that lots of times in Bible stories where, the Lord has told somebody to do something and they didn't do it, and they had like dire consequences because not obeying the Lord. I just thought that was kind of interesting, you know, that analogy, if the Lord calls you, whether you answer or not, you're going to do what the Lord says, voluntarily or involuntarily, because it's going to be resonating on your heart. And if you want to do what's pleasing in the sight of God, you're going to go ahead and do it. And, I've heard a lot of pastors say, they didn't think that was their calling, but they are some of the best pastors, to give the word of God. I thought about that when I was, going through this lesson. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It says, Introduction. Abram, who will later be known as Abraham, see Genesis 17:4-5, has become extremely wealthy because he had such faith and trust in Yahweh that he, at God's direction, had moved away from his homeland of Ur and renounced the pagan deities of his family. Lot, the son of Abram's deceased brother, had grown rich because of his connection to Abram. He was the recipient of portions of the overabundant blessing that Yahweh provided to Abram. As the two men wealth grew, their herds and flocks increased in number. As they settled in the land between Bethel and Ai, the herdsmen began to quarrel over the use of the land and the probable commingling of the livestock. It was time for the two to separate their assets, and Abram allowed Lot to choose his new land first. Lot chose to move away from Abram, while Abram stayed in the area. The scenario seemed to satisfy both men. However, this would be the beginning of a series of troubles for Lot and his family. We're going to start off with the conflict between the herdsmen, Genesis 13:8-12. Somebody want to read?
Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and the herdmen, for we be brethren. And 9, Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. The 10th. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered. every day before the Lord destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest into Zoar.
Okay. So starting off with verse 8, it said, Then Abram said to Lot, Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your kindred, your herders and my herders, for we are kindred. As you see right here, they're having conflict because Lot, it was like, well, they weren't getting along, and Lot was telling his nephew, Abram was telling his nephew Lot, we're not going to quarrel over this, you know, let's just try to settle this, because now from the lesson it's saying, it seemed like everything was getting commingled, the cattle, the sheep, whatever, and certain people, when you have certain things like that, you want to make sure you keep control of your stuff. You don't want somebody else having access to yours by mistake. And like I said earlier, that's the same thing with land. When family members have issues, now you got to get a surveyor out there to separate the land. You know where your side of it is, you know where your side is, and that happens with your neighbors too. You know, you gotta. They want to put up a fence, but if they putting that fence partially on your property, that's taken away from you. So now that's what Lot and Abraham, they call him Abram, but Abraham, they were going through this conflict now. So then Abraham tells him, uh, in the whole land before you, separate yourself from me. So now that he's telling them, he's okay, we're going to part. You're going to go one way, he said, like with the left hand, he could say, you can either take this portion or this set of land. And he said, with the right hand, I'll take this side. He gave him a choice. Which one did he want? And he said, if you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. And if you take the right, then I'll go to the left. He's trying, they said, let's be the bigger person here. He didn't see a need to quarrel because, like he said, the Lord had blessed him with much wealth, him and his whole family. So he didn't see a need to get that low with his own nephew. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did say that. Yeah. Yeah, he was. It said he was. It was his brother, his deceased brother's son. And in Bible reading, it said he practically grew up in Lot's home. So Lot practically raised him, and that's how. Yeah, and that's how they were so close. And when take him with you. He said, take your family, your workers, your herd, your sheep, everything. He told him to go. He said to leave. And Lot, being obedient as he was, he just did what the Lord said. And you think of us this day, if you live in somewhere, this is your home, and all of a sudden they come and say, well, you got to leave. The first thing gonna come to your mind is who, what, when, where, and how. How am I just gonna pick up and leave my house, my property, and unless and I was looking at the news this morning, they were showing some place in Charleston where they constantly having floods. And this lady's house must have flooded twice or the third time. And the third time when it happened, they, told, I guess the insurance company said no more. They sold the property and now they've cleared the house. There's nothing but woods there. They're not allowing anybody to build in that area anymore because it's prone to flood damage. So, you got to think, us as humans, these are the kind of things I think we would think about. Oh my goodness, you just telling me to get up and go. They're going to go with you. Yeah, my daughter always tell me, if you leave the state, I'm leaving too. So, your family going to go with you, especially your close one. Like Lot, he had a whole big family, a bunch of wealth. He had all these servers, all this land, the animals, and all this kind of stuff. So they took everything. I mean, Abraham took everything and followed right along because he had always been with Abraham. Yeah, so Lot looked about him and saw that the plain of the Jordan was watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And when I read that, how many of you thought about where it says, like the garden of the Lord? They said it was Garden of Eden. They were referring to the Garden of the Lord. And they said, if you read it, said the Garden of Eden was beautiful. It was water, the pretty trees, had it, it was really nice. And he said when he looked at the land and did a survey, it was really beautiful. Yeah, yeah. But he said that's what he thought. But then again, if you to read, it said it was like that was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So, in the reading, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. It was saying when Lot, he really didn't, in my reading, he really didn't look at the ramifications when he just chose it. I think he said, well, this is an abundance of grass, where my herds can be well fed. But it's like when you move to a new place, it's a lot of things that you need to find out. You need to find out about the traffic. You need to look at the crime rate. Is it a flood area? They always tell you these things, the school zone. I don't think he looked at any of that. He just saw hills and valleys, pretty green grass or whatever. Yeah, he didn't. He did not put God in the mix. He was going for whatever he could get out of that deal. And then it said before Sodom and Gomorrah. And if he would have thought, and I knew that Abram knew the history of Sodom and Gomorrah and everything that was going on there, I think that he would not have, chosen. Well, he gave him a choice, but with Abram being so dedicated and knowledgeable, he would have made sure that his people didn't commingle or get caught up in the stuff that was happening with God, Sodom, what is it? Sodom and Gomorrah. But it said, like you said, he didn't put God in that. He just saw, what he could get out of it. And like I said, it was to me, it was a rash decision. And stuff like that makes us think. Now, before you make a decision, try to get all the knowledge you can get before you do something. Even in the spiritual world, like I said, study to show thyself approved. Know what you reading, and if you don't understand, ask somebody. Can you explain this to me? They say, lean not to your own understanding. It might mean one thing, but we may interpret it as something else. And it's not what the Lord intends us to do if we don't read it right. So, he didn't really, Lord, like you said, into that equation. He was just seeing what he could get for himself. Mm-hmm. Discernment to me means knowledge, to know the depth of something. Yeah. Or, to have a true feeling, somebody else, discernment. Thank you for
You got to know how to find out. If you having a problem, let's do great things like that. You ask for information and you make a statement. And I know a person, and ain't nothing wrong with being open. Sometimes it's important. A person who retired from the school system, person put in some money, all the money one time. tired, send for the money, well, they gonna send you the check, Lord. If they send you more check, once you cash the check, if you got $400 coming, guess what? You might get 175, rest on the side. And so the person just find out that after, that's, then they call and they know, then they do it. You uncash the check. That's done with you. And so what you got to do, like I tell everybody who's getting ready to retire, you need to find somebody more time to say, we don't want them to black. We don't want them working out there. Well, they got the law straight down. If you don't get somebody in your business, guess what? Everything you got, you work, guess what? Stay. You go to stay. So you got to discern me and you find out what I'm about to move. Because you got to pray. If you don't know the right person, when you pray and ask God, God will always lead you to the right person.
And it says, Google says, discernment is the ability to perceive, understand, and judge things clearly, especially those that are not obvious or straightforward. If it ain't black and white in front of you, like you say, you need to ask questions, or like you say, you need to pray on it and ask the Lord for guidance. But another thing that's talking about, he was saying about getting checks. Um, this is going on now in the military. What's happening is, like you said, people offered a chance to get out early, or they got out early. They got a lump sum money. Then once they got out, you can apply for a disability rating. You got that rating. Now they going back and telling these people you weren't authorized to get that disability because you got the lump sum. Now these people are having to pay back all that lump sum money. Yes. 100 and so far they've collected 2.5 billion. They say they got 132 more million to collect. Huh? People who got out the military and got a lump sum when they got out, then they turned around and got a disability rating and they got that check also. Now they're telling them they got to give back that check. So that's not their fault. That's not their fault. That was their mistake.
And they're going to get that. Even if it's their mistake, I'm going to, you can act in 2015, we started out with we bought a house for 3 times. Now, when the people came by, they go in and they come in and they go to the neighborhood. That's why you got to check the people who and their people. The people man wrote, Mr. Jackson, y'all got this much family. They rolled up the check. 5 years later, you got my wife all that now. They are 5 years later. Oh yeah, you got it like this. You don't want it. 5 years later, you know if I had anything to do with it, that check is over. So anyway, he came back and said, Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, in 2015, we made a mistake. We gave y'all more. We overestimated. And now we want our money back. Yeah, I'm telling you, but you gonna pay them where you homegirl rule everybody. Homegirl rule everybody. President, all of them, guess what? Still that thing. All the senators, guess what? Now, we'll be back after we pay about a month after that, trying to rectify the mistake they made. they're gonna send some of the money back. Yeah. That's all I do. You really want to send some of that money back. But it's really got when people got the government, you can't hold this together. I mean, whatever they say, IRS, all that, it may be the biggest put going, but guess what? You can't fight it if you can't get no law. Ain't nobody will represent you. So the best thing you do is make it where
Okay.
that's it. The best thing we got going as a folk person like everyone else, the best bargain we got, the best person we got is to know the Lord is. If you got God on your side, you got to stand. If you just system, especially us. I tell all black the system you live in, that's what it is about. Now you can think the system on your side, but you will find out. You got to have God.
Okay. So now we're going to go into our second outline, which is Lot decides on his selections of the land. First, somebody want to read 11 and 11 and 12. No, 10 and 11 and 12. It's, from the lesson, it says, um, it just says that Lot and Abram were simply Bedouins, which means tent dwellers. However, this will change after Lot makes his move. It says Lot chose to move to the region of the Jordan Valley, which is east of where Abraham and Lot were standing between Bethel and Ai. Lot had seen the value of the region, like the land of Egypt, all the way to Zoar. Lot decided to occupy the southern part of the Jordan Valley, which will put him in direct conflict with some pagan worshippers. So, like you said, he didn't, really think that through. He just thought he was getting a good deal, and he went for it. And then, okay, so he chose that, and they went their separate ways. And then it says Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and went towards Sodom. And it goes on to say, but the men of Sodom were wicked, and verse 13, but the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. So if he would have put more thought into it, I don't think he would have tried to go that close to that city. Because we ourselves, if we know the area is not a decent area or a safe area, I don't think we're going to go and pitch our homes, try to build a home somewhere around that area, because we know it's not safe, especially if it's like Sodom and Gomorrah. It was like a crime-ridden everything. They were doing all kind of stuff against the principles of God and mankind. Yeah.
Yeah, but something we got to understand that was his destiny. That was part of his destiny. The Lord, when you think about it, go back and study who we are. The Lord used Lot. He did. And he also used Lot's wife. He said, no, he didn't. She turned to a pillar of stone. Yes, he did use him. He told him, said, what? Don't look back.
Look back.
Look here. She looked back. He used turned to a pillar of salt. What? Why? To let other people know when the Lord tell you something out, do you agree to the ground?
You obey.
When the Lord tell you, I was just want to verify. I get somebody that
choice. And also with the snake choice, you make it when you make it. That all goes back to discerning spirit. A lot of it for our it ain't even benefit a lot now. As we come here and study, we can see that the discerning spirit can benefit us in day-to-day affairs of life. Like some things do that, you're going to come out right. It won't help us. We can benefit from doing what God should have done. You got to discern the spirit. They can't pray with the spirit of God about everything, especially big financial. Some people don't consult God because they got money to X, Y, Z. Just run out there and do X, Y, Z of your own.
Yeah, but sometimes things was predestined in your life before your father and mother was even born. And that's predestined, I'm talking about by God. And that's gonna come to pass. It's gonna come to pass. You can't, it's gonna happen. Yeah, but that's you know, see, but I know a little bit more of that word than I heard than you. But it's gonna happen. It's going if God preordained that in your life, it's gonna happen. I mean, it's just the way it is. And it's a you know, the preacher said one time that God called him to preach and he know that. And he said he was being obedient to the word. He said if it was a way that he could have got out of it, that's what I mean man to preach in that church. Thy will be done, but not my will be done, but thy will be done. I'm done to you.
Okay. Where was I at? Okay, we were talking now at verse 13. Now the people of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. So he put himself close to that area. And, it just didn't work out good for him because, we all know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And when, he was told to leave, the Lord told him, take your family, leave, and go away. And like he said earlier, he told him, do not look back. And the wife, she was more concerned about the earthly things she had, what she was leaving behind, what she left. And, he said, don't look back. And what did she do? Turn around and look, He was destined to look back, like you said. So, like I said, a lot, we have to pay attention to certain things because a lot of times I think the Lord is talking to us, but we're not, really concentrating and paying attention. If something tells you, don't do this, don't do that, that's what I would say is a discerning spirit telling you, don't do it.
God speaks to the heart. Yeah. And I grant you, and I understand what you're saying there. I understand all that. And God is spirit. So he deal with what? He deal with your spirit. Read that right there.
But yeah, and a few years back, a group of us was supposed to go to Dominican Republic. I had already paid my money, everything was good to go. But then something just kept nagging at me. Something about going, it just didn't feel right. So we were talking about it one day in the kitchen, and Gina was there. And she said, you going there? She looked, she said, you got to go there? I'm like, what do you mean I ain't got to go? And out of the blue, she just said, D, I don't think you should go. So I looked at her, I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then my best friend Lynn, I was talking to her. And I said, why you going there? You always going somewhere. You don't need to go there. So, I looked at her. And then Mama even said, I don't think you should go. So, that's 3 people telling me you don't need to go. And of course, they were kind of upset, but I canceled. I said, y'all, I'm not going. It was just something in me. I already thought about it. And then 3 people told me, you don't need to go. Yeah, that's somebody giving you confirmation from the Lord, I think, saying, because anything could have happened while, you was over there. And, it just, Yep.
Some people expect God, but see, God ain't gonna come. We in the world together. God is for you and people. And you ain't gonna look at the people down there. And this is not a whole lot. But yeah, every time God trying to show himself, he ain't coming down here. God ain't. God used and equips us. God used ordinary people. So you got to listen to some ordinary people. You ain't got them.
Oh Lord,
But he ain't coming down.
the light bulb alone in the church come. The Lord, we need light bulb in the church. I can almost hear the Lord saying, "What you think I got you think?"
So that's why we got to pray. Because the scripture says we supposed to have a discerning spirit. And what the spirit, the discerning spirit means if you right with God, then that your rightness will help you determine someone else right. That same person said, if you ain't in order to discern God or somebody else, you got to have the presence of God yourself. You got to first have that spirit. So if you ain't got that spirit, you can't go out and find the spirit. And that's what a lot of people. You got everybody has to listen to somebody. You ain't listening to God, guess what? You got to deal with other mistakes, guess what? You gonna make a right one. God ain't coming down here and dress like that. I'm gonna lead you over there. You get ready to go. No, I ain't gonna do that. That's the spirit thought. So if you just have to leave God out here.
So let me see what was 13. So now let's go on to our last outline. God grants Abram the land. Verse 14 from King James Version. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up thine eyes for the place where thou art northward and southeastward and westward. 15. All the land which thou seest, to thee will I give, and to thy seed forever. 16. I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it to thee. Verse 18. And Abram moved his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Missionary, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. So once they had parted and went their own separate ways, the Lord is now talking to Abram, telling him, look at what you're going to inherit. And he was telling him, I'm going to give this all to you, all your offspring, all your herds, your workers. This is going to all be yours. And he's telling them, if a man can count the dust of the earth, then he can count your offspring. Ain't no way you can count the dust of the earth. He's telling them that's just how abundant your family and everything you're going to have, your wealth is going to magnify right along with your family. And he was telling him this, and it said Abraham was always thankful for the Lord, and everywhere that he went, just about he set up an altar to give praise and thanks to the Lord. And I just was looking, and in Genesis alone, it talked about the altars that he built. It was like 4, and 12 and 7. He built the altar there in this lesson. In 8 and 13, it's not a lot in our lesson that they didn't talk about. But when he was going into Egypt and all that was going on with his wife, and he didn't want them to know it was his wife because she was so pretty and this and that. Once all that came through, he built an altar. And then it says in chapter 13, verse 18, Abraham, which we talking about now, they separated, and he built this altar. And then in the second chapter, verse 9 through 14, it says he built that altar when he had to sacrifice his son. So just about everything he did, he showed praise to the Lord by building an altar to give, thanks, because, he knew that the Lord was going to bless him, whatever or however the situation turned out. Abraham was always going to come out with a blessing from the Lord. And I think, that's something that we have to think about. Even though this thing we may not want to do or things that happen, we got to give thanks to God because it could go left or right. And it all just depends, like she said, very quickly, a blink of the eye, it could be over. And that's why I always say you need to be careful how you address or who you talk to out here in the street because you don't know who that person is. The Lord could have put that person in your path to guide you, to help you with something, and you would never know. Like the other night, we was in the gas station, and the thing said Mountain Dew 2 for $4. So when I saw that, I said, "Let me get me 2 right quick." I get up there, the man said, "Well, do you have the card?" I'm like, "What card?" And he said, "You gotta have a Parker's card." I'm like, "I ain't got no card because it came out to $6." I said, "No, that thing said 4." He said, "No, you need the card." And this white man standing over there, he said, "Hey, you can use my card." So it's just simple little things like that you can be blessed with. You don't treat people, and coming from a military background, I learned that lesson, and I always try to tell people, you don't need to talk, you don't need to act that way. They always told us it's better to be seen than heard. And, stuff like that has been instilled in me ever since Sunday school. We learned that kind of stuff, how to behave. And like I said, Lot was like a perfect example because he did everything the Lord directed him to do. He didn't question it. If the Lord told him, get up and move, he got up, took his family, and they just left. Now, how many of us think that we could just do that? I think if we knew exactly it was the Lord talking to us, it wouldn't be a problem. But you just somebody randomly come up to you on the street and tell you to do something. First of all, you're going to look at them like, who are you? And like I said, we have to be very careful